Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Coast to Coast Combat Hour. I'm your host, Matthew Hawkins, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Ed Carbajal. And weekly, we are brought to you by AllAccessMMA.com. Check out AllAccessMMA.com for our video podcast, MMA News and Stories. This week, we have the pleasure of welcoming young Team Quest fighter Jon Brumley to the show. We've had several fighters from Team Quest join us on the podcast, and we're moving on to another one. So, Jon, thanks for your time. Appreciate you coming on with us.
Thank you guys for having me. I'm super excited.
Hey, so I was checking out your highlight this morning when I gave you the follow as we were. I was doing my homework on you for recording this. Dude, like you seem like you're pretty well. Was that the work of the editor, or are you that good with the with the striking and the submissions? Like you seem pretty well rounded.
I train as constantly as I can. That's why being injured right now is a little bit of a hassle. But when I'm on and I'm physically ready and mentally ready, I'm always in the gym day in, day out. 2 to 3 practices a day. I live in here. I started training when I was about 14, and it's just been a constant journey to improve. I'm obsessed with this sport. Funny enough, I fought February before that. I fought a super tough undefeated guy, and winner of that got a state title shot. I fell short in that one, but then it took 6 months to get another fight till August. And, I was super healthy, felt fine. I sparred the day after that fight, and it was just 6 months of constantly grinding, 4 fights falling through, opponents backing out, and finally I landed that one. And I just knew that was my one shot to show out and really show my improvements. That's my base. I love striking. I love jiu-jitsu. I'm confident anywhere it goes. That's the biggest thing is I love to stand there and trade. The problem is whenever I hit people, they don't want to stand with me, but that's where my jiu-jitsu comes into play. So I think the whole fight lasted a minute. So to be able to do all that in a minute was pretty cool. I was proud of myself. I wish it went a little further just because I want as much cage time as I can while I'm still an amateur, but it'll all translate when I go pro. So I was happy about it, but the wins only last so long. I'm ready to get back into training, get back into grinding and get another fight. I want to go pro hopefully soon by next year and really start making my way to the UFC.
When I met you, your enthusiasm really stepped out to me as far as a good attitude. You've had some ups and downs in your amateur career starting off. You mentioned starting at 14 years old. When you got old heads like me and Ed who've been following the sport for longer than you've been alive, to be honest.
Yeah.
I always like to ask the guys that kind of came up with the sport already a thing. You mentioned being 14 years old. When I was 14 years old, if I had mentioned this to somebody, they would have thought I was the most insane person to ever walk the planet.
Oh yeah.
What was it at 14 where you went like, I want to go fight, or what was there? Were you kind of an aggressive kid growing up? What was it that made you want to do this?
It's honestly a really funny story. I always say fighting found me. I didn't find fighting. Growing up, I was actually a really quiet and reserved kid. I have major ADHD. So as a kid, I was super to myself, and I was just kind of a shy kid. I wasn't super social. And as the years went on, I was still kind of super reserved. It was when my dad passed when I was 10, I got super upset. I was just a very angry kid. I got more aggressive, more hostile towards people. And then I also turned to food. So I was an angry little fat kid. So I just had nothing going for me. And I was super upset with how my life was. I was getting bullied a lot. And finally, I decided I wanted to try and lose weight. I start there. I started dieting like crazy, exercising like crazy. And eventually I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go into football. And that was the worst mistake of my life. High school football is terrible. You will get injured 100%. And I blew my back out terribly. I got super hurt. And it was like a 9-month recovery period to where I'm 14 going on 15. I need something to do. That's where I actually I met Mason in high school. So I've known him for 10 plus years. He's my roommate, my best friend. I've known him since we were kids. And he's who got me into this. He's like, well, hey, man, why don't you check out Dan Henderson's gym? That's where I'm training right now. I go in, first day I get my ass handed to me. And I got my ass beat. And it was funny because I was like, that sucked. But, I want to learn how to do this. Why not learn how to defend myself and make it something. Funny enough, my uncle is Chris Lieben. He's married into my family. So I've always been around it. My dad was a giant UFC fan when I was a kid. I just remember being super young. He'd have on WEC, Strikeforce. I didn't know what I was looking at, but I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And it all just kind of came full circle. Eventually, when we had Sam Alvey here, he was our head MMA coach, and I kept training and training, begging him to fight. I was like, I just really want to fight. I really want to give it a try. And I started doing some pancration fights. And that's where I really got hooked on it. It was just that energy and that atmosphere of making that walk to the cage, all those eyes on you. And it was the first time where, like, I didn't feel upset. I didn't feel angry. I felt this release of endorphins and stress. And funny enough, I didn't win that fight either. I went out there and I got hip tossed by, like, I think the kid was like ranked number 3 as a youth national champion. I fought like the toughest kid I could fight immediately, but it was something about it that just, it made me feel normal. It made me feel alive inside. And I just knew right from there, like, this is what I want to do. I immediately just dedicated all of my time, all of my effort into training. Even when I first started, my mom and parents, they weren't super supportive. My stepdad and my mom were like, oh, why do you want to do this? And I got my first job at a pizza place just to get my first paycheck and come straight here and go to Ashley Yoder and pay my first month. And the rest has just been history. It's a sport I just know is meant for me. I've been able to grow up and mature through this sport, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. All the ups and downs, all the injuries. I've had a rough amateur road. I won my debut and then was like, well, I just want to keep going. And I just fought some of the toughest dudes I could have been thrown at, which honestly is why I'm at where I'm at now, fighting all those tough guys and being in the room with such tough guys like Trevor, Mason, Jeff Creighton. It's molded me into a very dangerous amateur. My record ain't pretty, but I've been doing this for a long time, and I've only fought the toughest of the toughest guys. So a lot of these up-and-coming guys as amateurs are, they're undefeated. It's funny when they say no to fight me or somehow the fight doesn't materialize, but they're fighting debuters. They're fighting guys with losing records. They're fighting guys they know they can pad their record with, or guys see me and they see my record and they're like, oh, I can beat this guy, no problem. And then I go out there and I do what I do. It's a nice little hiding point because it's hard but easy to get fights here and there.
Hey, that's great, man. I mean, it's funny how, I mean, it's not the first story I've heard how somebody got some sort of injury, and that's how the injury kind of pushed them into combat sports. My jiu-jitsu instructor is actually the same thing. He tore his pec. He was a competitive power lifter, and then he got into now he has his own business where he teaches and trains on fighters and does jiu-jitsu. Do you think as somebody like yourself that's as young as you are, came into the sport, like Matt said, as a current generation enthusiast, and then competing and fighting, eventually going to go pro? Do you think like stories like that aren't told enough? Because like as a young person, did this and the stuff you hear around you, do people still kind of look at the sport negatively? I feel like it's already crossed the threshold.
It's funny you say that, and I actually talk about that a lot with people. I think there's one small issue with fighting right now, and it's not a bad thing. It's good for the sport. The sport is growing because MMA is still super young as a sport. It's the youngest sport to like take off. I think the biggest thing right now is that MMA is so ingested by mainstream media that you get a lot of guys that just look at this sport and they're like, oh, I can do this, I can hop in and get this going. And they don't understand that it takes years. It takes years of working and training and repetition and a constant flow of training to even be able to do what I did in my last fight. That's years of, that's not a month. That's not a few months of training. That's years of repetition, years of fighting. And I never talk about my story, but I definitely kind of had a bit of a rockier road getting here. At 17, while I was training, I left my parents' house and I was on my own for a little bit. And I was, couch hopping. I was going from friend to friend, staying at their house, asking for rides to practice, asking for rides to the gym, still doing pancration fights. I remember getting made fun of a little bit in high school because I was in high school when I had one of my pancration fights. I was 16, and I was using one of my buddies on the wrestling team in our weight room class. I was using him in the hallway to drill positions and drill stuff, and everyone's like, what the fuck are you doing? You look so stupid. They're like, oh, you look like an idiot doing this. And now fast forward, all those people are like, oh, I can't wait for your next fight. And I'm like, well, where was that when I was being a goofball on the hallway? But it's a sport. I think that it'll definitely weed out the weak. As a kid, having to kind of come up the way I did, I remember getting my car back, and I was living in my car my senior year of high school, sleeping in this gym parking lot. I would shower here. I would go to school. I would get food. I'd come train. And I just remember kind of having to go through living situations and money situations and doing everything I could to put fighting first, to put training first, to no matter what, be in here training. There'd be days where, dinner was rice and ketchup. And as long as I was able to go to training the next day, I was happy. And unfortunately, what I see right now is, especially on the amateur circuit, is a lot of guys, maybe they're older than me or they're younger, but they come in and they have all this hype around them. They're undefeated, but they're not doing it smart. They're taking easy fights. They're taking easy roads, and it's giving them a false sense of confidence or ego. And then they go out there and they get smashed by a good guy, or they fight a veteran guy and they don't do as well. And the thing that I preach to my amateurs that are up and coming on our team is you better take the tough fights and you better be in here, because it doesn't get easier. It only gets harder. And especially as a pro, the rules are different. The time is longer. The fact of danger is way, way higher, because refs are going to, refs won't step in when you get knocked down and kind of save you. They're going to let you get hurt. They're going to let you keep going. And this is just a sport that, as a person, it's helped me mature and realize that, life ain't fun. Life isn't fair. And it's what you make of it. And this sport is what you make of it. And if you truly put in time and effort, you will get there. It'll be rocky. Being a fighter sucks. I wanted to be a vet when I was 10, and now I'm paying bills, but I'm getting by. And you have to suffer before you can breathe in this sport. And that day will come. That day will come when you can sit back and realize, okay, it finally paid off. I'm getting paid. I'm getting fights. But you gotta go through the trenches just to even get one bit of air. And I'm all for it. I don't shy away from that. I welcome any challenge. I welcome the adversity my career's thrown at me. It's allowed me to honestly have kind of a crazy life in terms of meeting the people I've met, training with the people I've trained with. I remember being 18 years old. I was working for AT&T, and they flew me out to Ohio for 2 weeks. And the gym right next to my hotel was Strong Style. And I'm 18, I'm an MMA nerd. And I got to train with Stipe for 2 weeks right before he fought DC for the first time. And having that opportunity for 2 weeks of having that guy, I was in the same room as him and having him coach and be a part of his classes. I was like, this is exactly what I want to do. Traveling, fighting, meeting these top people. It's such a dream that I can feel slowly inching its way into my reality. So I'm excited.
Well, I can tell you right now, just hearing you say that, like the maturity coming out of you, and just the positivity, and yet knowing that there's always going to be ups and downs. It's something that you don't hear from a lot of younger fighters. If you want to be honest, a lot of people believe their own hype as opposed to this is a process that's going to get there. So you mentioned training. You mentioned being around Stipe. You're at one of the most famous fight teams to ever compete in this sport. I grew up watching Dan Henderson fight in Pride and in UFC early on. Obviously, Ashley Yoder, seen her fight several times. You got, Joe Stevenson's around there. You mentioned Sam Alvey. When you step into when you show up there, do they tell you about the history? Were you already aware of the history of Team Quest? Because like you said, you got top teams, you got Shoot Box, you got Team Quest, you got Pat Militech, but there's not really you're one of the Hall of Fame fight teams of all time. Do they teach you the legacy and what they expect from you when you become a Team Quest fighter?
Actually, kind of no. When I first started fighting, I knew nothing, and that made me uncomfortable. So I became a full-blown nerd. I got obsessed with fighting, with lineage, knowing my history. And the cool part about coming to this gym is I got kind of lucky. I actually got to come here during the peak of when this team started really blowing up. Back when Dan was still active, Sam Alvey was in the room, Fieri Sokuju was in the room, Luke Rockhold was making appearances. And I got to grow up watching these practices and realizing how deep our lineage goes. Back when Frank Lester was here, Jason Mayhem Miller was here, Krzysztof Szynski, knowing that this team has had some of the toughest and most brutal killers step on the same mats as me. And I've been able to be fortunate to come to every single practice, watch every pro practice, follow every guy coming through our team. And it's been crazy just to see how deep these roots go. I mean, there's Team Quest Portland. You got Chael Sonnen up there. And it's crazy because I've always wondered what it'd be like to be training during that time. And I just know it was a way more brutal time.
Yeah.
The training was tougher. The rooms were way tougher. It was even back when my striking coach, Tarek Safdie, was active. You had Tarek, you had Dan, you had Vinny Magalhaes on these mats. And it's crazy knowing that somehow it all makes a full circle. Being able to be taught by these guys, having those guys in the same room as me. I even got Dan standing right next to me right there talking some business. But it's truly it's truly crazy to see how deep and rich in history my gym and my fight team has. And I'm really fortunate about that. I get to really show I get to really be shown who and what I'm representing when I'm at this team. The lineage Team Quest has. I remember back when even before Trevor and Mason were pro, on the amateur scene when our amateur team was huge, it was a feared name. It was hard to get fights. I remember they would have to lie on their camo profiles and on their pro profiles and not list gyms, not list coaches, because guys wouldn't want to fight us because of our wrestling.
You know what's funny? You're talking about especially you're 24 years old, and you just said that you tell the other people on the team that are coming up to take the hard fights, get as many amateur fights as you can. There's a time where there's a weird like thought out there that people think they can do 1 or 2 amateur fights and go pro, which is obviously obviously a mistake. I mean, what you're doing, I mean, you and Mason and a couple of other fighters. I talked to a lot of fighters since I've been covering the sport. Like Jose Shorty Torres comes to mind. I mean, he got almost 20 amateur fights before he even went pro, and you saw how far that got him. What about the experience? Like, when do you get the trigger that says now it's time for me to go pro? I mean, I know you told us off before we started recording, but just for the podcast, can just let people know.
I think the biggest thing about if anyone's listening that is an amateur, you need to get beat up. You need to get your ass kicked. You need to be in here having tough rounds, being thrown around. I think I'm fortunate enough because when I first started training and being a new AMI, I was in a very, very tough room. And going back to what you're talking about with Joe Shorty Torres, having all that amateur experience, it plays into effect. Amateur and pro, in a sense, is the same thing. And I'm only saying that is we're all putting in the same training, and it's still a fight. You can, the amateur or pro, you can get messed up in there. But you got to remember, as an amateur, you're more protected. And that is the amateur ranks and scenes is for that experience to kind of give you and show you confidence-wise where you're at before you're going pro. And the biggest thing that I see is, like you said, guys, they get 2 knockouts in a row. Oh, they're good to go pro. Or they look at all these pro guys who had no amateur experience or in the UFC. Well, they don't realize they didn't have that opportunity. All these veterans, all these hardcore guys, all these top 5, top 10 guys, they didn't have amateur back then. It was only pro. They didn't get that luxury of being able to have a choppy amateur experience, and then they got to go pro and fix it. It was straight into the fire for them. But, when I was young on these mats, like a kid, I was getting beat up by the likes of Sean Strickland, Chris Curtis. They would come to our amateur practice, and they would literally tell us, hey, we're going to spar with you guys, and we're not going to take it easy. We want to see how you guys do. And I was getting dropped left, right, and sideways, body shots, takedowns. Sean Strickland being the crazy psycho he is, having that guy in the room was terrifying. And it's one of those things where I would say you'll know when you're ready to make that jump, when your coaches start having that conversation with you. But the biggest thing is when you stop losing your rounds, when you're competing on these mats, when you're bettering guys that were bettering you, when you're hanging and competing with some of the toughest guys in the room. You may not be you may not be winning all of your rounds, but you're competing. If you quit in here, you quit in that cage. And once you come to a point where you're no longer quitting, you're truly in that stubborn, I'm going to win this round mindset, and you're able to translate that into your amateur fights. That's when it's time to make that jump. There's no rush to go pro right away. And that's what I had to realize as a young kid. When I was 19, I won my debut in 40 seconds. I got a quick sub of the night. I dropped the guy. And I was like, I need that feeling again. So I just took fight after fight after fight, not processing that you need to take time in between. You need to go back and adjust. Just because you win a fight doesn't mean you're invincible. Doesn't mean there's not still stuff to work on. You need to be enveloping yourself in the suck as much as possible. It only gets harder. The training only gets harder. I'm in here. I'd say the biggest thing that I've seen is I train in Vegas a lot. I go to Extreme Couture. My grandma lives in Vegas, so I'm always there.
Oh, you're so lucky.
The rounds and the work at that gym. First of all, Eric Nixick is one of the nicest coaches I've ever met. I talk to him all the time. I'm always, letting him know when I'm coming down. But the work in that gym and the talent level you will see, I still get overwhelmed sometimes. I still feel like a kid, like, oh my God, look at, I got Ion Kutalava next to me. I got Brad Tavares next to me. I got Cody Stamen. I got Cody Garbrandt. I got Magalev Ankalaev. Like, there are these to me legendary guys that I'm watching them rise, and I'm next to these guys on the mat. And when you're able to be in practices like that and actually, hang and not get your ass handed to you too much, that's when you can comfortably start making that transition. It's not a fast thing. It's a slow transition. Because when you go pro, there's no one in there but you, the ref, and that fighter, that other professional fighter, where the rounds are longer, elbows are legal, knees are legal. You can be totally covered in a crimson mask, and as long as you're still breathing, the ref's going to let you fight. You need to understand that the transition of amateur to pro is you need to be prepared for anything. Amateur is way more cushioned, but as a pro, you have no idea what you're walking into. You can train, but it's 50-50. And you need to be mentally okay with that, knowing I might go in and come out different than I was. There he is. Breaking bones, tearing ligaments. Mason's a good example of this too. I had one fight. It was my third amateur fight. We're in all the same fight. I popped a bursa pocket in my elbow, broke my right hand, and tore my Achilles, my ACL, all in the same fight.
Wow,
in one fight, and I was an amateur. And I'm just thinking, like, imagine if I was pro and I had 5-minute rounds, still letting adrenaline try and coast me to a decision.
Yeah.
It's a different animal. It's just a different animal. That's the best way I would say it. When you're ready to go pro, you will know. Your coaches will know. You can just feel it. You know you're ready for that next challenge, not that next step, that next challenge, because it's a completely different ball game, and you just got to be mentally prepared for it.
Yeah, you mentioned we talk about the amateur fights, and somebody who's been around and seen fights in different states and cities everywhere. A shout out to San Diego MMA. Your location right here allows you to compete in Epic Fighting, which is one of the top amateur organizations in the entire planet. You mentioned Vegas. Tough Enough is out there. I know Mason fought for them. But you're not. This is real amateur fighting. This is the top level amateur. This isn't some backyard fight club where you're just getting some practice in. One of the things that people won't be able to tell just by watching or listening to this is the natural physical attribute you have of being 6'2" and fighting right now at welterweight. Talk about being a tall welterweight, and is that if you go pro, is 160, 175, or I'm sorry, 170 the weight that you want to fight, or are you looking to go a little lower than that?
I literally was just talking to Trevor about this before I got on this call. I'm in a very weird spot, funny enough. When I first got into fighting, obviously I lost weight, but I didn't have any of the physical attributes I have now as being an athlete and really taking my training seriously. And I'm like kind of a tweener. I can make 170 on day of, no problem. I have to diet a little bit. At worst, I cut 5 pounds. But I'm in this weird stage where I need to make a decision. And if I want to go to 55, I'm going to be a big 55er. The problem as an amateur right now is I'm either fighting maybe guys my height, but they're skinny, or I'm fighting short, stocky muscle heads. My very third fight, I headlined for Epic, and I fought this dude who was like 5'9", but he was jacked. He missed weight. Both of our opponents didn't show up, and they're like, hey, look, you were supposed to fight in the prelims. Your guy's not here. His guy's not here. He missed weight, but you'll be in the main event. Do you want it? And I immediately was like, fuck yeah, I want that. And I just remember I was doing well in the fight, but he was so strong. I just remember going like, damn, this sucks. So where I'm going to be at, it'll be decided kind of in these next few months, actually. While I'm taking some time off, I'm lifting a lot more. I'm trying to add as much lean muscle to my frame. In between fights, I'm lifting. I'm in the gym trying to get as strong as I can because eventually I'm either going to need to buckle down and get professional help and, start making that road to 155, taking some catch weights at 165, or I have to fill in. I have to get bigger to stay at 170 because let's be honest, some of these pro welterweights are massive. Look at I always reference Michelle Pereira, who I've seen in person. And I'll be damned every time I'm like, how do you make 170? He's massive. There are guys that walk around. Sean Strickland, again, another good point. When he was here, he would be a little bit over the 200s, and I would see him kill himself to make 170.
Yeah.
Kill himself. Chris Curtis, same thing when he was fighting at 170. These are big dudes.
Yeah.
170 is big dudes or either slim athletic dudes. At 55, I would have height, I would have reach, but I'm giving up a bit more physical strength because at 55, look at Michael Chandler. That dude is a physical specimen. And every time I look at him, I'm like, at first glance, if you didn't fight, you would not think this guy fights at 155 pounds.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to make some choices. Most likely when I go pro, I'm going to try and take a couple 65s. which should be a division. I stand by that. Khabib's doing it. It should be a division. I would be a champ at that division. I would love that weight because right now, even out of shape, I'm only 185. But I've been heavy, though. There was when COVID hit, especially. When COVID hit, no fights were happening. I was just lifting. I actually ballooned all the way to 205. I was jacked. It was absolutely awesome. We went out to Arizona and got to train with the lab for a little bit. I went to Benson Henderson's gym at the lab. Jared Cannonier was there. It was super cool. I felt strong rolling with Cannonier. I was like, oh, wow, this feels good. And then there's a picture of us when we went to Sugar's gym, Sean O'Malley and Tim Welch. And there's a picture of me standing next to Tim Welch. I look jacked, but Tim's even bigger. And he fights at 170. And I'm like, damn it, like I'm not there yet. But we'll see. Either I'm gonna have to sacrifice and suffer and make 55, or I'm gonna have to get as jacked as I can and go to 170 and hopefully not get mauled by some of these huge dudes. But we'll see. I'm excited. I know if I can get my body where I want it, I can still compete at 170. The weight doesn't matter. The weight will never matter for me. I just want to fight. I don't care who you are. I don't care how big you are. I don't care how scary you look. That doesn't win fights. Skills win fights. And I aim to prove that every time I fight.
Yeah, you know what? Let me I want to share that clip, if you don't mind, off of on Twitter. I'm going to share it on screen here for the folks that watch the video version of this, because this is, like, again, I saw it this morning, and I was like, I sent it to Matt, and I was like, yo, this kid's something else.
Yeah, it was a fun one. It's crazy how it was a whole minute. I did all of that in a minute, and I'm like, I wish it went longer. I felt I was actually almost ready to hit. I was after my fight to Mason, like I'm kind of down to hit pads right now.
I got to mute it just so we don't get the copyright strike. But,
oh yeah.
But I just wanted to show it so folks that are watching this can see the clip. I mean, you could tell you already switched mentally, got the mental switch on there. But the thing that caught me out as soon as you land the first, I think it's a right hand. Yeah, I'm just
funny enough that first right hand he got me with actually kind of stunned me. I was like, oh shit, he hits way harder than I thought. Right there, I was like,
right there, yeah, that one right there. And I was like, wow. And then of course, like noticing it, like the body type, they categorize the soma type as ectomorph, and I was like, yo, he's an ectomorph. He's an amateur. And then watching this, I was like, he can hit and he can do submissions, and just watching you make the transitions on the ground here, it's just amazing stuff. So as soon as I saw this, I was like, the only reason he went to the ground is because he didn't want, like you said, you landed those strikes and he didn't want any part of it.
It's actually kind of funny. The first knockdown I landed, when he came up back to a knee, in my brain, I was like, oh, there's a knee right there. And then I remembered, no, you're amateur. Don't do that. And then I tried to hit him. It was the second knockdown where I knew he went unconscious. I saw his eyes roll back. I knew he was out. So when I rushed at him, I didn't realize when he fell down and his head hit the canvas, he woke back up. So when he grabbed me, I was like, whoa, like, wait, we're not done. And then I fell back to my guillotine, which I need to stop doing. That's a dumb habit. But I knew I'd be safe. I was able to work my way back to the cage. I knew as long as I could get to the cage and be out in the open, I'd be okay. He was hitting me with some okay shots from the top. It was when I was able to lock in the armbar, I knew I had it. He was turning the wrong way, and I just felt it pop. I got a picture on my Instagram where you can just see the arms completely, completely stretched past its limits. Luckily, the Chris Lieben stepped in and stopped it at a good time, because all I felt was pop, pop, and then finally they stopped it. I don't want to hurt anybody's career, but if I had to break his arm, I was like, damn, dude, I guess I have to break your arm.
Because you don't want to be one of those. I mean, we've seen it too many times where the guy stops to be nice, but the fight still goes and things wind up going the other ways. So, I mean, like the rules that they say it all the time, protect yourself at all time until the ref stops it. So that's definitely, that's more maturity.
Yep. I have one lovely piece of advice that I will never, ever, ever forget. And it was from Tim Elliott. I met him in Vegas in December of 2019 when I went there to train. It was before he fought. Who was he getting ready to fight? Oh my God! It was Tim Elliott. I think he was getting ready. I think it was when he was getting ready to fight Demetrius. Joseph Benavidez was out there. But Tim Elliott said, "Yeah, Joe Benavidez is the nicest fighter I've ever met. He is such a nice, humble guy." But Tim Elliott said, "Just remember, all those highlight videos you see, it's because, no one wants to be made a highlight. Doesn't matter how cool you are. You can be friends leading up. I fought a teammate before. Like, no one wants to be a highlight. And you got to remember, you might feel a little bad if you do some damage to somebody, but if they could do the same thing to you, they would in a heartbeat.
100%.
You got to make sure, like, if you see your opportunity, you better take it. Because, my mom's not going to be crying. Your mom's not going to be crying. That's all I can say. I'm not going to let my mama see that. So
yeah.
You so before we start recording, and you told me in the past, you had your recent win, and then you were going to fight again for Dan Henderson's fight night there at the gym, and I believe it was the night or couple nights before the scheduled fight.
yeah.
You suffered a pretty gruesome injury, right? Without getting too graphic here, what happened, and what's your recovery looking like?
I actually lied. It was 2 weeks out, and I kept it hidden for as long as I possibly could. I was training over in Oceanside, getting some extra rounds, and I was defending a double A against the cage. And it was a freak. It was just a freak accident. There was no ill will. I had a bunch of cool guys over at Coastal Combat giving me extra work. They had a lot of southpaw wrestlers, and I was just defending a takedown, and I was balancing, kind of ballerinas balancing on my left foot. And the way shifted and the way the universe saw it, my ankle completely gave out. It exverted and introverted, or supinated. So it wobbled a lot. Nothing was torn, nothing was broken. I was very fortunate to come out of that like that, but everything got sprained pretty bad. So luckily, it's a major injury, but I'm gonna be okay. I'll be strong.
Yeah.
It's just healing it up, letting the sprain heal up. I actually, before I hopped on here, I was hitting legs today. First day back hitting legs, pressing 3 plates. I'm moving a little bit, getting my footwork back. I've still been lifting and boxing like crazy, so my hands are going to be even crispier. I'm really excited about it. I'm actually super excited when my next fight is, because I know my boxing will be even better, because that's all I've been doing. So what I did was, obviously I got hurt. I called Trevor right away, and I was like, look, man, I got pretty hurt. I don't know what's going to happen. And I told him, like, do not say anything at all. I immediately was getting injections in my ankle. I was getting some PRP, trying to help my ankle and my knee, doing whatever I could, doing therapy. And what I was planning to do was I was going to get my ankle wrapped up as tight as possible. I was going to let it go completely numb. And once the adrenaline kicks in when you're in back, you feel nothing. And I was completely content with going out there and fighting like that. I didn't care. But, that's just me being pig-headed, not wanting to pull out. I've never said no to a fight, and I have never pulled out of a fight. So there's a first for everything. But I remember my coaches talking to me like, look, man, like, I know you want to fight, but you got to be smart. You got to save your career. There's no point you got lucky with a sprain. What happens if you try and fight and then, you go out there and it's a life-changing injury.
Yeah.
And also I was on weight, but I not being able to run, I was sitting at 190 and I'm like, there's no way I can even start my cut. If I can't run, I can't be mobile. I can't sweat. So it was painful, but I was like, all right, I'm going to pull out the fight. Luckily, we had a guy on our team that was ready. He took the fight. He won. And it was crazy. But, I did get a little upset in the beginning. I've had some major injuries, but this one, like, I got a little upset by myself. I feel like I let the injury win for a little bit. I got kind of down in the dumps. I was feeling real down about myself. I'm like, oh, where's my career going to go now? Like, what's going to happen? Not realizing this is just the path. This is how it is. I may be an amateur getting hurt, but look at all these. Look at Johnny Walker. That fool tore his shoulder doing a victory dance. It's gonna happen. Injuries. No fighter ever goes into a fight 100%, and I just have to realize that this will only make me better. It'll only make me stronger mentally, physically, and I'll come back hungrier and meaner than ever.
Yeah.
I plan on having some fun fights when I come back, because it just shows I need to get this going. I don't want to be 25, 26 and still an amateur. Like, oh, next year. I need to show that I'm ready to make that jump. I'm ready to go out there and perform the way I know I can perform. I've been slept on a lot of my career because of my record, and that's kind of a nice thing though, because everyone sleeps on me and everyone counts me out, and I'm totally fine with being an underdog. I have no problem with that. On my Tapology, there's a ton of odds showing how people should just walk through me, and I have fun proving them wrong. And I just know it's gonna be the same way as a pro, but I'm getting better every single day I'm in here, hurt or not. And I just know once I have those lights on me and I have that platform on me, I know one day I'll be a household name because of what I've had to go through, because of the setbacks, because of the constant push to be better. I know it'll be able to translate, being able to be around these high-level guys, going to pro shows, being around these guys in the UFC, it feels normal. It doesn't feel like, oh shit, look at this guy. Oh my God, look at this show. It feels normal. I feel at home. And that's how I know that I'll be able to come, anything thrown at me, I'll be able to overcome it. I've had a lot in my life where I've had to hike up the
Yeah.
bootstraps and just suck it up and deal with it. And that has made me mentally stronger and more physically stronger. That I just know no matter what, I'll be able to fight. Nothing will ever deter me from wanting to fight.
100%, man, and that's the thing about guys like yourself, those before you, those that are coming after you, the ones that decide to set the target. As long as you stay focused, these are just bumps in the road to
Exactly. Yeah.
to the path that you've already set your sights on.
Yeah.
You're ready. So, um, all the power to you. You mentioned the UFC a lot, obviously, as that's your target. We got a pay-per-view this weekend that we got to do some main card picks on. So, if you don't mind, we'd like you to help us old bald bags do that as the skilled fighter on the chat here. So let me bring
It's
up the
got
fight card.
Oh yeah, it's got some super cool fights. The
Yeah.
one fight that I think's being a little slept on, funny enough, is actually Caitlin Chukagian and Marion. I think it's Ferro is her last name.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of female fights kind of get overlooked. But Manon Ferro, I'm a fan of her. She's 4-0 in the UFC. I think she's got 2 TKOs and 2 decisions. And as a female fight, I'm very excited to watch that because also you got Caitlin Chukagian, who is a vet in terms of being at strawweight and being at flyweight in the women's division. And she's only fought killers. She's fought Jessica Andrade. She's fought former champions. That's a fight I'm super excited about. I personally think Manon Ferro, she's a hungry, hungry woman. And she's very ferocious. And you don't really see that a lot in female fighters. It's very select few. Like, you got Valentina Shevchenko. You got Joanna Jędrzejczyk. You got Rose Namajunas. Girls that train to their absolute max, and it's you can see it in their fights. I like Caitlin Chukagian. I just think Manon Ferro is going to come out there and either TKO her maybe late in the third, or she'll pull out a dominant victory. And I 100% see her fighting for a belt soon. She's on a high road right now, but she's a giant test in front of her with Caitlin. It's definitely I wouldn't call it a pick'em fight. I'd say it's a passing of the torch. If Caitlin wins this fight, I think she should get a title shot. I feel like they've been denying her title shots for a while now because she'll fight a tough girl, she'll lose, and then she'll win 3 to 4 in a row, or she'll win 2 in a row over good contenders. But Manon Ferro I think she either debuted or she got called up from Contender Series, but she came in and immediately started making a statement. So I pay attention to fighters like that. Fighters that come in and they're quiet, they're not making big waves, they're not running their mouth. They just go in and they win their fights. I highly pay attention to guys like that. Especially with the next fight. I don't know if it's before or after, but Bilal Muhammad and Sean Brady. That's a cool fight at 170. That's a pretty cool fight at 170. I think it's the first fight. I may have skipped one.
I think that's actually the headlining prelim, I believe, is
it?
Brady.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Fight. Yeah. So
I thought
the
that was on the
prelim's
main card.
loaded. No, that's the ESPN closeout before the pay-per-view.
Wow.
Yeah. You mentioned your comments on the Chukagian fight, and I'm kind of leaning with you now. My initial thought is that Chukagian's just this veteran who the puzzle to beat her is really tough. She doesn't really bring any tools to the cage that's something extraordinary or something that jumps out at anybody, but it's just her constant professionalism, her ability to keep her distance, work her jabs, work her punches. Not necessarily the violence that you talk about, Firat, but so I'm initially thinking Chukagian by decision because I've kind of been programmed by that, by how she's managed to work through people. So now I might stick with my pick just because I'm not going to change it coming in. She's obviously a veteran who manages to pick apart people, but after hearing what you said, I'm definitely way more excited for this fight because if there is a prospect who comes in and shows dominating fashion over Chukagian, then there's no doubt you're talking about a next potential superstar in the sport.
And with Caitlin too, she's a vet. Look at who she's fought. She's held down the number 1 spot for a minute now.
Yeah.
It's not like she's just like, some ranked fighter. She's been holding that spot and defending that spot for a while. So it really could be a pick 'em. I think there could be, in terms of pressure, I think there's a lot of pressure on both ladies. Manon Ferro is number 6 right now, and she got to the top 5, the threshold of the top 5 very quick. So some could argue like maybe they're rushing her and maybe she might not be ready. That's why this is such a tough test for her because she's going from beating, she fought Jennifer Maia and she did really well. Stepping up from that level to immediately the number one ranked fighter could
Mm.
be hard. But then again, you have Caitlin, though, who I don't even, actually, I don't even think there's pressure on her because she's been holding down that top 5 ranking for a solid minute now, just going after girls, fighting tough guys. So in terms of my pick, I'm gonna keep on. I think Marion could stop her late, or Caitlin's just gonna show that veteran status, that giant resume of experience, and I think she'll decision her. Those are my either or, but I don't know. Part of me feels like Marion's going to get it done. She has such high-level striking. I believe she has a boxing and Muay Thai background before even MMA in Paris. So she's used to being in dogfights, and she pushes the pace. So it's going to be a fun one.
Yeah, I'm leaning Chikagian by decision just because, as you saw in the stats there, that's the bulk of her wins are that way, and again, she's kind of got seniority. So, but this next one is actually more of a. I like. It's not more of a coin toss to me. Beneil Dariush versus Matthias Gamrot. Not so much of a coin toss as because I like both fighters. But I was doing my homework today. I saw Gamrot. He held 2 titles over at KSW, so I'm kind of leaning
That's what I was
towards
going to
him.
bring up. I'm a big fan of Mateus. It's funny enough. I remember when he debuted in the UFC. Sorry, I'm plugging my phone in. He fought. Who was it? It was oh my God! It was I'm gonna butcher his name trying to say it, but it was Khamzat Chimaev's teammate. Oh my God, I can't even remember his name. Or I know his name.
Kutateladze or something like that.
Yeah, I think it was Kutateladze. But that fight was an absolute banger. The fact that it was their debuts, but Kutateladze had to fight a former 2-division champion in that fight. The biggest thing that I want to take away from it is he went out there and achieved a very, very nice resume outside of the UFC. Gamrot fought tough dudes. It's not like he was fighting schlubs. European competition is pretty high up there.
Yeah.
Now, looking at who he's fighting, I don't know. I really like Beneil Dariush. I like him as a person. I like him as a fighter. I do think, though, he's fought some of the who's who's. But unfortunately, what I've seen is when it comes to him fighting young up-and-comers or guys on the come-up, I think the durability factor comes into play. Everyone's talking about how he just fought Tony, and that's a good win. That's a good notch in the belt. Tony Ferguson is an awesome win on anyone's resume. But personally, I think he fought Tony on Tony's way out. I think in terms of where the fight can go, first of all, the grappling aspect, people are not even understanding. Oh my gosh! How do you say his first name? Is it Mateus? Yeah, Mateus. He's a jiu-jitsu black belt in himself, and he has an insane pedigree in jiu-jitsu. Most of his wins are by submission. So on the ground, he presents a bigger threat to Beneil than most guys have. It might even cancel itself out. So I'm actually kind of hoping that both of them don't even try and engage in grappling, and we see what striking they can pull off. Matthias Gamrot showed good striking when he fought Arman Sarukian, which then again, too, he just beat Arman Sarukian, who's a very tough young kid who's been plowing through the division, fought Islam in his debut. I'm going to stick with Gamrot on that pick. I like Beneil. I just think it's another passing of the torch moment. We're truly starting to see the next generation of top 15, top 5 guys entering their way into the UFC. And I like Beneil. I just think he's, I don't know. I don't want to say he's going to get destroyed, but I don't. If it goes all 3, I see him starting to kind of weather down toward the 2nd and 3rd round, only because you're going from Tony Ferguson to Matthias Gamrot. So the pace will be immediately hiked up. It's going to be a way faster pace, way harder scrambles. It's going to be a way harder clinch battle on the feet. We're going to see how Beneil does. He's been cracked a few times. I think the biggest knockout loss in his career that kind of changed a few things for him was when he fought Edson. And then I think it was Alexander Hernandez, debuted on short notice and knocked Beneil out. So I don't want to say his chin could be cracked. I think it's been weathered down, and I don't know. If I'm Mateus, I want to keep the fight standing as much as I can, staying outside of the pocket, using my range, and force Beneil to get uncomfortable and shoot. Because it's when guys shoot on Mateus, he's able to use that top pressure and that top game incredibly well. So I'm excited for that fight. I'm going to go with Mateus on that one.
Yeah, I'm leaning the same way. I tend to, You know, Dariush's borderline title. I mean, if he wins this, he's probably the next in line for a title
Oh,
shot, or at least
he should be.
he should be based off his resume. The history of this sport doesn't look kindly on guys, though, that have to continually try to fight to win, to get a title shot. We saw it with Tony Ferguson going for an actual belt. Going back, George Stadaropoulos had a big winning streak years and years ago. Actually, when Joe Stevenson and those guys were running the lightweight division. I tend to think your time just comes up. He's on a 7-fight winning streak. You don't hear of a lot of 8, 9-fight, 10-fight winning streaks in the UFC. And he's fighting a young up-and-coming guy who had a loss a few fights ago, which is probably best for his career. He came into the UFC undefeated. He gets that loss out of the way. He's been able to establish himself in a couple fights. Has nice quick finishes over guys like Jeremy Stevens, who is a tough fight no matter who's in the cage with him. So I'm leaning Gamrot as well. I think a decision. I think Dariush is durable enough probably to avoid a big strike knockout finish. Might get hurt, might get dropped, might get grinded out. But I tend to lead Gamrot. But I mean, even at Dariush at number 6, if he wins this fight, I think it's a little bit of a disgrace if he's not in the next. I think he should get the next title fight if he wins this fight.
Well, did you see they immediately gave it to Volk? So they said that no matter what, the winner of this lightweight title, Volkanovski's going to go up and take that, which me and Mason were talking about it. I'm a big Volkanovski fan, but I don't see him beating Islam or Charles. One, both guys are way bigger, and they're just, I don't know how to explain it. They're a little more accoladed in terms of who they've been fighting. You know, Alexander, he's been fighting some super tough dudes, but to go up right now to 55, which is probably the most shark-filled division, that's a tall order. So we'll see. And then Charles was saying that if he wins, he'll fight Alex, and then he even wants to go back to 45 and take Alex's belt. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think Charles should ever try and make 45 again. He has problems making 55, but we'll see. I don't like that they're kind of slumping Benny like that, but you know, hopefully he gets a crazy win and he'll have to be next. So
that's the thing. That's the thing. If he shows out this weekend, then they can
talk be undenied.
So, John, I'm curious for this next one with O'Malley and Yanka, especially since you just said you spent some time training at with O'Malley. Does that kind of factor into your decision on this one?
You know, yes, but no. Sean O'Malley, you know, as much as he talks and does all that, that guy's good.
Yeah.
He is good. I've seen him train in person. He is good. He's well-rounded. He has good jiu-jitsu. He's got good wrestling. He's got good striking. Here's the deal, though. You know, in terms of guys he's fought, you know, he had Pedro Munoz, which was a little bit of a disappointing outing. But to be completely honest, he hasn't been fighting super tough dudes on his little rise right now. The Chris Montino fight, Rylan Pava, like he's been kind of, I don't want to say his record's padded. I'm not saying that at all. These are still elite level guys in the UFC. But he hasn't touched anyone that has been through these top 15, top 5 waters. And as good as he is, let's be honest, Peter Yan is a fucking killer.
Yeah.
By far, I would say one of the scariest guys at bantamweight. I think he presents a tough test for anyone. Even with both Aljo fights, he presented a tough test.
Yeah.
My dream fight, me and Mason were saying, I would love to see him fight TJ. Here's how this fight goes to me. Either O'Malley's going to just show everybody he really is that good and it's going to be some crazy fanatic finish, or Peter Yan is going to use his veteran status in terms of he's been fighting some of the best guys, even coming up in the UFC. He's been fighting, I mean, Jose Aldo, Uriah Faber, taking out, not just beating them, taking out legends in the sport. And for O'Malley to kind of, what is he ranked right now? He's ranked number
hold on, I
like
think
13,
12.
Here. What is he? He's
11.
They got him at 11.
Yeah, so a number 11 going against number 1. You know, a lot of people are upset because they're like, oh, why is he getting such a big jump? But to be real, not everyone's really lining up to fight Peter Yan. I just think that if it goes past the opening rounds, like in terms of like late round 1, late round 2, I have Peter all day. You know, it's going to be in the opening sequence where O'Malley is most dangerous, when he's able to be flashy, when he's able to be quick, and his gasing's at 100%. Not saying he has no cardio. I just think Peter Yan's going to go out there and dismantle a lot of what O'Malley claims he's going to do. But again, it's 50-50. O'Malley can come out there and slump him with something crazy.
Yeah.
I just think, you know, in terms of saying he's going to be humbled, I don't want to say that. I just think he might really get a really tough test put in front of him. And this might be a fight where he might not do as well as he has, and he has to go back to the drawing board. He might have to kind of reevaluate his level in terms of, who he's fighting. I think if he does lose this fight, he needs to go back and start taking smart fights, but they need to be fights that make sense. They're not, low-level contenders or entry-level guys. Because let's be real, if he makes through Peter Yan, if he beats Peter Yan, and he has guys in front of him like Dillashaw, like Aljo, he can say he'll beat these guys all day, but he just hasn't fought that level yet. So I'm gonna go with Peter. I'm just gonna be biased and say, experience is gonna win this fight. You can, again, same as an amateur, you can fight all these guys. But if you're not fighting tough dudes, it's not making you a better fighter.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And just to copy your answer, but the only thing I'm adding is I just feel like Peter Yan's meaner. I just feel like he's mean.
He's mean as hell.
Yeah.
I think he's mean, and he's going to be angry for this fight. There's a lot on the line for Peter Yan. He's lost 2 out of his last 3 fights, given the one was a disqualification. He was kind of embarrassed by Sterling in their last fight, so I think he's gonna boat race O'Malley. I think he's gonna pound O'Malley out. I think it's gonna be a fight that might not be good for Sean O'Malley's future career. I think that we talk about guys taking beatings. You talk about the difference between amateur and pro, where a ref will let you take one. If O'Malley, I hope it's a good fight, but I think Yan might do a Brown versus Young Wonder Boy kind of thing.
Exactly. He's gonna be. I feel like people are saying all the pressure's on him, but there's really not a lot of pressure on him. If anything, the pressure's on O'Malley, or not on O'Malley. He really doesn't have anything to lose. He has everything to gain. But for Peter Yan, you're right. He's on a 2-fight skid, and he wants to reclaim that he's the true champion. And that's a fire really no one can put out. I think if O'Malley gets cracked a few times with some good shots, it's going to be a different ballgame for him. I truly think it's going to be a very hard test in front of him.
The co-main event, title fight, just mentioned Aljamain Sterling, TJ Dillashaw, one of the former champions. I've mentioned on the show several times, I'm a huge fan of TJ Dillashaw. I was there when he beat Renan Barao, shocked the world at UFC 170. I ever since then, I've really been kind of riding his coattails as far as a fan. I know he has issues with the PED thing there. Anybody who's also heard me talk about PEDs, it's not something that I'm old school. It happens. We can talk off camera about how many people we think might be on PEDs, but I'm going with TJ Dillashaw. I'm a fanboy. I'm going with Dillashaw. I think he's more skilled fighter. I think Sterling has a path to victory. I think it's a boring path to victory if he's able to wrestle it and really stifle Dillashaw. But I think Dillashaw's movement and striking ability, and we've seen Sterling, Marias took his head off with a kick. I feel like Dillashaw's got too many angles and too much pop in his punch and kicks, where eventually he doesn't land something that staggers Sterling and potentially leads to maybe like a 4th round TKO finish.
Yeah, it sucks because with TJ, it really does suck that he took the route he did in terms of his PED use. The one thing though, as a person, that kind of makes me judge the character a little bit. But the one thing I don't care, you can do, John Jones, etc. You can cheat. That is what it is, and you can take performance enhancing drugs. But I will never take away your skills as an athlete. Steroids don't give you skills. Skills give, training gives you skills.
Yeah.
And for TJ, he came into the UFC as a D1 wrestler, where that let him dominate so many fights. But then he hooked up with Dwayne, and everything changed. In Vegas, they are Dwayne Bang style Muay Thai out there, and that style of Muay Thai, Tarek Safdie, he teaches Dutch style, and that's really aggressive. It's really, it's a more aggressive style of Muay Thai and Dutch boxing. With Bang style, the angles, the movement, the footwork, hiding shots behind certain counters. TJ has gotten so good at that right now, I don't think anyone's going to be able to match that creativity of striking. And in terms of going back to Aljo, these are 2 wrestlers, if you will. But look at Aljo. Aljo shot 22 takedown attempts on Peter in the last fight. Only 2 landed. And Peter isn't really known for his wrestling. He's known for his amazing Muay Thai. Well, what's going to happen when Aljo is shooting after shot after shot after shot against a guy like TJ, who not only has crippling striking, but has a D1 NCAA All-American background. TJ can do it all. And I think you're right. I think if Aljo tries to make it that grind you out, cage fighting, or fence battling kind of style he has, I don't think that's going to boast well for him. I think his style, in terms of his stand-up, just doesn't bode well for him with TJ. Because, again, when you go back to when Marlon Moraes took his head off with that kick, those are the kind of angles TJ looks for. He goes low with his feints. He comes up high with his kicks. He has a switch counter right hook that I have not seen anyone perfect besides him. He gets off the center line. He plants his feet. Boom. That right hook comes at you from an angle that you just can't see. And Aljo, he just kind of stands there a little stiff. I'm not saying his striking isn't that good, but, I know he has Marab. I know he has Dennis Bazukia. I know he has Ali Quinta. But let's be real. None of those guys can imitate TJ. No one can imitate movement like that. No one can imitate striking and fight IQ like that. I think TJ's going to get that belt back. I think it's either going to be a 5-round war where it's TJ dominating, or he's going to stop him. I just see TJ getting his title back.
Well, this is where our coastal proximities come into play with my pick. I mean,
I know.
We just had the last podcast that we had Ron Rivers, who actually trained with Al Sterling when he was getting started on the last podcast that we did. So, there's 6 degrees of separation with the New York, New Jersey jiu-jitsu community. So it's hard for me to root against Aljo. So I'm not picking against him. But I definitely could see why you all are siding with Dillashaw, who's technically he's on that Boss Rutan lineage because of the Bang Ludwig and everything you mentioned. The striking, I know that comes from Boss's style of striking, which I'm a Boss Rutan guy too. But
Aljo's still dangerous though. Yeah. Aljo is a big 35er. I actually watch his YouTube channel a lot. He's a big boy for 35. I'm not gonna lie. I highly anticipate seeing him move into 45 soon. Eventually in his career, he's a big bantamweight. Mason met TJ Dillashaw a while ago. This is when he was an amateur, and they were trying to do like a little mini amateur docu-series. TJ's short, but he's stocky. He's a big dude. TJ looks big right now too. But Aljo is a frame, height, width, etc. He's a big dude for the division. So when he was on Peter Yan's back, when he was, having those exchanges on the ground, I bet it was still a fight for Peter. And I know it's going to be a fight for TJ. It's going to be about who has the better IQ on the ground, in the wrestling, in the jiu-jitsu. Because Aljo's jiu-jitsu is still incredibly dangerous. Look what he did to Sandhagen, who's on a tear right now, who just dominated Song Yadong, who went the distance with TJ and arguably won that fight. Aljo does have some tricks up his sleeve. So I'm excited. I think TJ is going to win, but I'm not going to be surprised if Aljo pulls out something cool and slick out of his bag. That's the one thing I'll never sleep on Aljo for, is he has slick jiu-jitsu. So I love jiu-jitsu like that. Everyone says jiu-jitsu is boring, but guys that are constantly attacking subs and doing
it's only boring if you don't know what you're watching. Yeah,
exactly. The uncultured. Exactly, the uncultured.
Main event time. This one, it's for the unclaimed lightweight title. I don't know, man. I got a lot of opinions on it.
I'm stumped on this, because here's the deal on this one. I think all the pressure is honestly on Islam. And the reason being is now every bit of eyes, no one's talking about Khabib anymore in terms of activity. It's all back on Islam.
Yeah.
And, that was their whole game plan. When Khabib leaves, it's Islam's time. And Islam has beat super good dudes in the division. But if we go back to not Oliveira. I got my boxing coach right here saying Oliveira is going to take it, which is bringing me to that. Oliveira has been put through the trenches. He has been in the UFC way longer than Islam. He has the most career finishes, the most UFC finishes. Also, he just stomped 3 top 5 killers back-to-back in their prime. Justin Gaethje, Michael Chandler, Dustin Poirier, in their prime. And it's funny. The one thing I say about Oliveira is, with Oliveira, it's a stressful time watching him, because he'll be losing and then he wins. But the thing that I would put in terms of pros and cons, right? It's scary.
Yeah.
Islam is good. Islam is dangerous on the ground. He's beat guys like Dan Hooker. He's beat guys like Bobby Green. He's dangerous. he is a mauler in terms of his strength and his athleticism, using that Dagestani wrestling, using that hard-nosed training style. But Charles is just a veteran. I can't count him out. But I'm going to be interested to see how this plays on the feet for Islam. Because let's say Charles, later Jerry, let's say Islam is able to, maybe push the pace and start working on takedowns. Charles can wrestle. Charles can defend takedowns. Charles can be mean from those positions. So if it stays standing, I'm going to give Charles striking the advantage. But if it goes to the ground, I'm very anxious to see which physicality plays better. Because I know for a fact Islam's got to be strong as fuck.
It's a great way.
He's like, look at who he's training with in terms of having Khabib on him. But then again, you just can't count Charles out. And the biggest thing going for him is the hype of he just stomped 3 of the best contenders to ever walk through the lightweight division back to back, finishing them. He didn't just beat them, he finished them, and he made it look like a hard time. I don't know who I can pick. If Islam wins the title, I think he'll have some tough matches ahead of him. If Oliveira wins and reclaims the title, I won't be upset by it. It's a pick 'em. I just can't pick. My headphones just died. You might get some background noise. I just can't pick. I truly think this is going to be probably one of the best lightweight fights in UFC history. There's so much potential for it because either they're going to stand there and one of them's going to go down because they don't want to grapple, or it's going to be an amazing display of wrestling and jiu-jitsu and just all-around MMA. I really don't know who to pick. I cannot pick one.
I'm leaning Makhachev. I think you mentioned the Poirier, you mentioned Chandler, you mentioned Gaethje. All 3 of those guys' path to victories on the feet. All 3 of those guys didn't want any part of Oliveira on the ground, and rightfully so. I think this is the first guy that Oliveira is going to fight in a very long time who's going to want to be on top of him on the ground. And
exactly.
Who's going to be willing to dish out punishment from the position and look for submissions on Oliveira. So I lean Makhachev. I actually think I'll pick him to finish like 3rd round. I wouldn't be surprised if he actually lands some kind of submission after he beats up Oliveira, because we have seen Oliveira fade in the past. He's been rebounding on the feet lately. I just don't think he gets back to the feet this time.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I think the thing that Islam needs to understand too is he shouldn't get comfortable playing that stand game with Oliveira. Because the one thing I've noticed is Oliveira is really starting to hone into that power at 55. I know he subbed Justin Gaethje, but to crack Justin Gaethje, let alone knock down Justin Gaethje, that's a feather in the cap. And then to go through and knock out Michael Chandler, who honestly was winning that entire fight. There's so many weapons this guy's going to utilize.
Yeah, I mean, really quick, because we're already going over the hour, but you mentioned something that I already have in my notes about just the durability of Oliveira. The way he gets to his wins is almost risking losing. And I feel like if Makhachev can capitalize on that, that's how Makhachev wins. Listen, that's an early card. First bell's at 10 a.m. Main card's at 2 p.m. all Eastern time. I know you guys are 3 hours behind me, but in the evening, UFC Fight Pass has one of your boys fighting. So if you want to plug that real quick before we wrap it up, by all means, go right ahead.
Yeah, you got to go on the lookout for Trevor Wells. He's an up-and-coming flyweight right now. He's 7-3 as a pro. He's fighting for Uriah Faber's A1 Combat. You can catch that on UFC Fight Pass. We got a few guys in our gym right now that are making some waves, and they're finally starting to scratch that surface. Trevor beats this guy. That'll put him at 8-3 as a pro. And as a flyweight, that's a great record. The UFC needs flyweights. And the cool thing about Trevor is he does not care who he gets offered. He will fight anybody. He's an absolute dog in the gym. He is as durable as they come. He's not afraid to stand there with you. He's not afraid to wrestle with you. It's definitely an exciting prospect fight to watch out for. And then my new head coach over these last 2 years, Jefferson Creighton, he's fighting for Stellar Fights over in Maryland. He's 5-2-1 right now. He actually just fought for Uriah Faber's A1 Combat. He fought for their inaugural welterweight title and got a draw, which didn't make any sense because he beat the hell out of the guy. Another guy to look out for at 170 right now, making waves. But yeah, if you're looking to watch some fights, you can watch Stellar Fights on UFC Fight Pass, or you can watch Uriah Faber's A1 Combat. You can watch either Trevor Wells, Jefferson Creighton. It's going to be some good fights. It's definitely going to be
a very fun pace to watch. They're fan friendly fights. It's action the entire time. There's no boringness inside of it.
Nice.
And
And just let
if any of the local fans, Southern California fans, are listening or watching, Trevor's Fight for A1 Combat is the first time Uriah Faber's come down to Southern California. So
Yep.
that'll be at the Commerce Casino in Commerce,
Oh
LA,
yeah.
LA County. So
oh yeah,
it
that's
is
right.
a semi-local fight for anybody that might want to get out and see it face to face.
Oh,
John,
yeah.
before Matt takes us out, why don't you let folks know where they can follow you, where your next fights are and announcement stuff next?
Yeah, I mean, really, I'm mainly active on Instagram. My Instagram's _JB170 with another underscore. I post a lot of my stuff on there. I have my Twitter. It's at J Brumley MMA. When my next fight is, I'm hoping to step back in the cage by January. If anything, I'm looking to probably fight again with Epic. That's most likely what's going to happen. I'm really trying to gun for a state title shot if I keep beating guys the way I'm beating them. But fighting in California, has its downsides. We got day of wins over here, and that sucks. I hate that. So I might be looking at going to Texas. We have a buddy, one of our old training partners, who's a matchmaker right now for MFC. It's a up-and-coming pro-am show over in Texas. And they honestly have some super tough competition over there. It's day before weigh-ins. It's 4-ounce gloves, so it's a bit more risky, but it's that elevated level of danger and excitement that I want as a fighter. So I don't know. We're gonna see. If I'm not fighting in California, I'll be fighting in Texas. But no matter what, I'm looking to hopefully step in there. If not late December, January, I'm looking to fight 2 to 3 more times as an amateur, and then I'm definitely gonna be making my pro debut by summer of 2023. I would like to fight 3 times as a pro coming next year. I by 26, 27. I'll be right at that doorstep for the Contender Series or the Ultimate Fighter. I promise I'm a fun guy to watch. I truly give everything to this sport. It's the only thing I know. I only know fighting, and it's been gracious to me. It's humbled me. It's humiliated me. I am excited to know that once I'm on that stage, I feel like I'll be a fan favorite and people will want to watch me because I don't play any kind of BS. I'm there to fight. I'm not going to talk trash to you. I'm not going to, really get into anything. I'm just going to go in there and I'm going to try and take your head off.
As it should
Awesome. Well, we'll be watching, and I can't imagine anybody that's listened to or watched this podcast won't be following your career as it unfolds here. Fans can check out the show at Combat Hour on Twitter, Coast to Coast Combat Hour on Instagram. Follow me, Matthew Hawkins, at MMA Hawk21 on Twitter and Instagram. You can follow Ed at Carbazol on Twitter, Carbeerzol on Instagram, and Old Head Carb on Twitch. John, thank you for your time. Also, check out our show again at allaccessmma.com. Check out allaccessmma.com for our video podcast and MMA news and stories. John, thank you for your time. Appreciate it. Look forward to watching how your story unfolds over the next several years, and definitely want to have you on again when that fight comes up.
This is the first time I've ever done a podcast, and this is honestly the coolest thing to me. I've always wanted to be on one of these, so I thank you guys much for giving me the opportunity to come on here and let me run my mouth. I'm really good at talking, so it felt normal. But this was the coolest time of my life. So thank you so much for having me on. I was super excited.
Thank you. We'll see you soon.
Hell yeah.
Good night. Thanks for listening.